See infrastructure, building a better world.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. We're moving to the next stage of the pandemic. As the world resets to the new normal, we find ourselves seeking the right balance between health and livelihood, constantly adjusting the boundaries between liberty and responsibility. Here are tonight's news. The World Health Organization said that it has temporarily suspended clinical trials of the hydroxychloroquine as a potential treatment for COVID-19, being carried out across a range of countries as a precautionary measure. Take a look.
On Friday, The Lancet, as you know, published an observational study on hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine and its effects on COVID-19 patients that have been hospitalized. The authors reported that among patients receiving the drug, when used alone or with a macrolide, they estimated a higher mortality rate. The executive group of the Solidarity Trial, representing 10 of the participating countries, met on Saturday and has agreed to review a comprehensive analysis and critical appraisal of all evidence available globally. The review will consider data collected so far in the Solidarity Trial and, in particular, robust randomized available data to adequately evaluate the potential benefits and harms from this drug. The executive group has implemented a temporary pause of the hydroxychloroquine arm within the Solidarity Trial, while the safety data is reviewed by the Data Safety Monitoring Board.
President Trump, who announced last week he's taking the drug, has prompted governments to bulk buy the medicine. And Brazil's health minister also recommended last week using hydroxychloroquine as well as the anti-malarial chloroquine to treat even mild COVID-19 cases. The Lancet study found that both drugs can produce potentially serious side effects, particularly heart arrhythmia, and neither drug benefited patients hospitalized with COVID-19, according to a Lancet study which looked at the records of 96,000 patients across hundreds of hospitals. Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus stressed Monday that the two drugs are accepted as generally safe for use in patients with autoimmune diseases or malaria. WHO Chief Scientist Soumya Swaminathan, meanwhile, told Monday's briefing that the WHO-backed Solidarity Trial had been looking only at the effects of hydroxychloroquine and not chloroquine. China's plans to impose a new security law on Hong Kong will not erode freedoms, that is according to the city's leader, as she tried to reassure international businesses and foreign governments alarmed by the proposal. Chief Executive Carrie Lam said the controversial law would only target a handful of lawbreakers, but she would not be drawn on what actions and opinions would be deemed illegal once the legislation is passed. Take a look.
If we want to protect the majority of the people, then if the minority of the people, indeed a very small minority of people, are going to breach the law, to organize and participate in terrorist activities, to subvert the state power, then of course they have to be bounded by the needed legislation, that Hong Kong's freedoms will be preserved, and Hong Kong's vibrancy and core values in terms of the rule of law, the independence of the judiciary, the various rights and freedoms enjoyed by people will continue to be there. Some of the things that you have said about mainland agencies coming down to arrest people, undergoing protest, and they will be arrested, calling the chief executive to step down at the moment are your imaginations or things that have been said by some people. We are a very free society, so for the time being, people have this freedom to say whatever they want to say. So protest itself is an expression of freedoms and rights and opinions if it is done in a legal way, okay? You must observe the law. Everybody has the right to observe the law. So it is just not quite reasonable for you to ask me to guarantee that a certain type of protest will be allowed, another type will not be allowed. It has to depend on the circumstances and whether it has been done in a legal fashion.
Beijing wants to enact legislation banning secession, subversion, terrorism, and foreign interference in the international finance hub after months of massive, often violent pro-democracy protests last year. Hong Kong was upended last year by 7 months of huge and often violent pro-democracy protests, fueled by years of rising fears that Beijing is chipping away at the city's freedoms. Millions took to the streets for rallies that routinely ended with clashes between riot police and smaller groups of militant protesters wielding petrol bombs. Now, Beijing portrays the protests as a foreign-backed plot to destabilize the motherland. Protesters say their rallies are the only way to voice opposition in a city with no universal suffrage. But Mrs. Lam said fears the city's business-friendly freedoms were at risk were, quote, totally groundless. To Canada now, commercial landlords can now begin applying for a government rent relief program. The Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program aims to reduce the rent owed by small business tenants by 75% for April, May, and June. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said one of the biggest problems facing struggling businesses now is paying rent. Take a look.
What reopening means for you and for your family will be different for everyone. Just take the realities facing small business owners. Some are ready to open their doors as soon as they get the green light that it's safe to do so. But for many more, getting back on their feet will be a challenge. And one of the biggest concerns is paying rent. That's why we created the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program. This benefit will provide forgivable loans to landlords so that they can lower rent by 75% for small businesses hit hardest by COVID-19. It will also be available to nonprofit and charitable organizations. As of 8 o'clock this morning, applications have now opened. If you're a landlord with up to 10 eligible tenants and you're located in the Atlantic, BC, Alberta, or Quebec, you can apply today at cmhc.ca. For landlords in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Ontario, and the territories who have up to 10 eligible tenants, tomorrow's your day to apply. Landlords with more than 10 tenants will be able to apply later this week. To landlords, please apply. And to business owners, make sure you're holding up your end of the bargain as well. The Canada Emergency Business Account can help you pay your rent on time. And the wage subsidy, which we're extending through the summer, can help you rehire your workers. We're all in this together, and together is how we're going to get through it.
The rent relief plan, funded jointly with the provinces, provides non-repayable loans to commercial property owners to cover 50% of the monthly cost. The loans will be forgiven if the property owner agrees to cut the rent by at least 75% for those months and promises not to evict the tenant. The small business tenant must cover the remaining portion of the rent, which would be up to 25%. To qualify, small business tenants must pay less than $50,000 a month in rent. They also must have experienced a revenue decline of at least 70% from pre-COVID-19 levels, or they must have been forced to close down because of pandemic restrictions. Nonprofit and charitable organizations are also eligible. Thailand has extended its state of emergency for a second time to the end of June, despite opposition calls to scrap it after coronavirus cases dwindled. Spokeswoman Narumon Pinyon Sinwat said the step is needed to lower the risk of another wave of COVID-19. The administration is loosening the lockdown in stages to restart the economy. The opposition argues less strict legislation can manage the outbreak. The majority of Thailand's confirmed 3,045 virus cases have recovered, and very few, if any, new infections have been detected in recent days. The opposition also raised the prospect of asking a court about the lawfulness of bills earmarking 1.9 trillion baht in stimulus to fight a recession. The administration rolled out executive orders under the emergency for the stimulus program, which includes 1 trillion baht of borrowing by the government and another 900 billion baht of steps from the Bank of England. President Duterte believes the opening of classes should be pushed back until a vaccine that could protect persons against coronavirus disease would be developed. In a public address late Monday night, the president said it was useless to talk about the opening of classes, particularly holding it face-to-face without a vaccine. Take a look.
We produce it for human
Okay, first, let's go to the next. Coronavirus cases in India have been rising at an alarming rate over the past 2 weeks, with an average of 6,000 people testing positive for the deadly COVID-19 virus that broke out over 5 months ago. Take a look. The Times Now News.com says, as per the latest bulletin released by the Ministry of Health and the Family Welfare, there has been a rise of 6,535 cases and 146 deaths in the past 24 hours. The total number of cases in India has now crossed 145,000. Meanwhile, India's central bank slashed interest rates in an effort to contain the economic fallout of the world's largest coronavirus lockdown and warned the economy could contract this year. Even before almost all activity shut down in late March, Asia's third largest economy was struggling to gain traction with sluggish growth, record unemployment, and banks reluctant to lend. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is gradually easing the world's biggest virus lockdown, which has caused mass unemployment among India's 1.3 billion population. Eagle News will be right back.
Star Tollway is a 41.9-kilometer highway that stretches out from Santo Tomas, Batangas, all the way to Batangas City. An important component of the company's portfolio, the NAIA Expressway project is a 5.4-kilometer elevated expressway that connects the Skyway system to NAIA Airport terminals and the entertainment city. SMC Infrastructure's ventures also include other projects aside from the toll road business.
Hello there. Imagine Dami got the virus and she infected 2 more. And those 2 infected a lot more of people. And it goes on and on until it became an epidemic. But what if Dami stayed at home? Then those 2 wouldn't have contracted the virus. Then those people would have not been infected. This is not just your battle, it's everyone's, and you can be a huge help. Follow social distancing, or better yet, stay at home.
Welcome back. President Duterte believes the opening of classes should be pushed back until a vaccine that could protect persons against COVID-19 would be developed. Take a look.
Unless I am sure that they are really safe, it's useless to be talking about opening of classes. That's probably man. Para sa akin, bakuna muna. Pag nandiyan ang bakuna, okay na. At saka, if you're not allowed to go out, especially yung bata, pero malapit na. I think by the grace of God, we will have the vaccine before the end of the year. So mag-asa na lang tayo sa mga marunong at saka mayaman na mga bayan. They are feverishly working on it. Pag nandyan na yan, ako na ang magsabi labas na pag hindi ka lumabas, hilain kita sa labas, dito ka. Sige, pasyal na kayo. Kaya may bakuna na yan. Bakuna muna tayo, tapos bahala na. But without the vaccine, it's really danger.
Meanwhile, the president of Guatemala is one of the top 5 leaders in Latin America, voted for good management of the COVID-19 situation. We have an update coming in from our EBC Guatemala Bureau, Nadine Dueñas. Hello, Nadine.
Hello, buenos dias, Alma.
Yes,
And yes,
good
based
evening
on
already
the
over
report.
here. Yes.
Oh, wow. Pues buenas noches.
Buenas noches, yes.
Based on the report, Imagen del Poder o Poder de la Imagen, or Image of Power, Power of Image, released on May 15 by the organization Directorio Legislativo, a nonpartisan and independent organization that promotes the constitution of autonomous, flexible, democratic, and independent spaces through dialogue with various actors in the public, private, academic, and civil society sectors. The president of Guatemala, Dr. Alejandro Giammattei, placed second after the president of El Salvador in the ranking of presidents who best managed the coronavirus outbreak. This report is the result of the surveys held by the consultancy firm Mitofsky in 12 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean during the months of March and April 2020. After the confirmation of the first COVID-19 cases in Latin America in late February, most of the governments in the region have reacted by imposing strict isolation measures that entail major economic and social impacts. The objective of the report was to answer to the following questions. What level of support does the government have when facing the medium and long term? And do citizens trust their ability to respond to the challenges of the present and the future? Well, during the months of January and February, Giammattei had a 56% of acceptance by the Guatemalans, but in the past 2 months, his decisions and management resulted in an increase of 31 points, ending with an 87% of acceptance and support. The report further revealed that the following results about the opinion of the Guatemalans concerning the President Giammattei are that the presidential management of the crisis obtained an 89% of approval, 81% agreed with the prohibition of going outside for a long period of time, 87% agreed with the suspension of public transportation to avoid conglomerations, 89% agreed that it was a right decision, the closure of coffee shops and restaurants, 93% agreed with the shutdown or closure of frontiers, and 85% of the Guatemalans trust in the government of Dr. Alejandro Giammattei. In the ranking, President Nayib Bukele of El Salvador placed first with an acceptance level of 96%. In third place comes President Alberto Fernandez of Argentina with an 80%. In fourth place, President Martín Vizcarra of Peru with a 73%. And in fifth place, President Luis Lacalle Pou of Uruguay with a 65%. As for the presidential measures for this week, in Guatemala, those are still the same as the ones that were applied last week, wherein it is only allowed to circulate within your own departamento. Hours of circulation is only allowed between 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. All stores and shopping centers will remain closed, and supermarkets, grocery stores, and neighborhood stores are allowed to operate only between 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. And there will be a complete lockdown of the country on weekends, wherein the toque de queda or the curfew starts at 5 p.m. on Friday and it ends on 5 a.m. on Monday. To the date, there are 3,760 COVID-19 cases, 3,425 active cases, 274 recovered, and 59 deaths. En Ciudad de Guatemala, Nadine Dueñas, Eagle News. Vivimos en tiempos interesantes. Back to you, Alma.
Thank you, Nadine. We look forward to hearing more news from Guatemala. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, dozens of people gathered near the Argentine government house to protest against the government's handling of the pandemic, asking for an end to the lockdown, to return to their jobs amid the economic crisis. Argentinian President Alberto Fernandez announced the nationwide coronavirus lockdown is being extended until June 7. Buenos Aires and its outskirts have 87.5% of the cases of COVID-19 in Argentina. Meanwhile, as Argentina sunk into its third default this century, the government also said it is preparing to improve a restructuring proposal for creditors, citing a narrowing gap between the two sides. Talks with bondholders will continue even after Argentina failed to pay $500 million in overdue interest last week. Economy Minister Martin Guzman said in an interview he declined to say when the new proposals would be announced, though, while reiterating that the government was open to changing aspects of its initial offer and that some kind of sweetener to creditors was still on the table. The South American country is looking to restructure $65 billion in international debt. And slowly reopening the economy, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson said stores will reopen on June 15. Joining us live from the United Kingdom is Jennifer Ringwood.
We intend...
Hello, Jennifer.
Hi, Alma. How are you? It's always good to see you.
Okay, I wish I could see you.
You can't see me.
Hello, Jennifer. There you go. Now I can see you. Good to see you, Jennifer. What are your updates for us?
Okay, I'll get straight to today's report from the United Kingdom. On Monday, Prime Minister Boris Johnson said that Britain could reopen all non-essential retail stores on June 15th if the coronavirus remains contained. Can we watch that? Do we have a clip for that? No? Okay. So we've hopefully we should have heard
Boris Johnson.
Sorry?
We wait for Prime Minister Boris Johnson.
So there was.
We intend to allow all other non-essential retail, ranging from department stores to small independent shops, to reopen. Again, this change will be contingent upon progress against the 5 tests and will only be permitted for those retail premises which are COVID secure.
Yes, Jennifer.
Okay, so we've heard there in that clip that they have an intention to allow non-essential retail, ranging from department stores to small independent shops, to reopen, stressing that this will be contingent upon the progress against the disease. Now, the British official death toll as of early this morning, although I do expect another update a bit later on today, it's getting very, very close to that 37,000 mark, and that's still currently Europe's highest. There have been other reports on how high that is, but at the moment, according to our government website, that is the official. We are closing in on that 37,000 mark now. Deaths have fallen sharply. There is that confidence starting to build now, as the peak seems to have lessened, and the country is now on course to reopen outdoor markets, car showrooms, as well as schools, as we heard yesterday, for the younger children on the 1st of June. Johnson said, because of the progress we are making, I can with confidence put the British people on notice of the changes that we intend to introduce as we move to step 2. He said classes can resume for the oldest children on the 15th of June. Again, we heard this yesterday, just going over it again. We are asking schools gradually to reopen. He also said, I'm confident that the common sense of the British people will see us through. Alma?
Okay, so there is also a big news coming out of the United Kingdom. A top aide of Prime Minister Boris Johnson has just resigned. What is this all about? Dominic Cummings.
Oh, Dominic, I'd heard that a Scottish aide had resigned. That was Douglas Ross. He resigned this morning.
Okay.
You may have got more up-to-date news than I have.
Okay.
But yes, Dominic Cummings is one of Boris's chief aides. He was a key member of his Brexit campaign in 2016. And he was quite successful in leading that with Boris Johnson. And he's also been one of the key people involved in laying out the guidelines for the lockdown measures. So there's certainly been a lot of intense scrutiny over his actions during the lockdown when his wife first became unwell. Prime Minister Johnson on Sunday defied pressure from within his own party and backed up Dominic Cummings over allegations that he breached the coronavirus lockdown rules. Okay. Johnson rejected calls to sack him after he came under fire for travelling across the country with his wife as she was suffering from what was then thought was symptoms of the disease. When the official advice was given out to isolate at home, Johnson said during Sunday's news briefing he believed Cummings acted responsibly and legally and with integrity after the pair had held crisis talks. Mr. Johnson goes on to say, I've concluded that in travelling to find the right kind of childcare at the moment when both he and his wife were about to be incapacitated by coronavirus, and when he had no alternative, I think he followed the instructions of the instincts of every father and every parent. So he added that Cummings has been seen with his son close to his parents' home in Durham, and it's more than 250 miles away from his London home. And that was on the 31st of March, which, as we know, was still during the lockdown period. The Observer and Sunday Mirror reported that he had broken lockdown restrictions again and was seen in Durham a second time on the 19th of April, days after he had returned to work in London following his first trip north. A lot of these things have been disputed in his press conference yesterday. A named witness told the newspaper that Cummings was also spotted in the town of Bernard Castle, 30 kilometres from Durham, on April 12th. That witness was convinced it was Cummings. He filed a complaint with the police for a possible breach of the lockdown rules. We found out, I think I heard it this morning on the BBC, that was actually the day of his wife's birthday. So there's a lot of questioning and controversy surrounding him. I think the issue isn't really what a parent would do, it's more what the lockdown rules were and the fact that he was involved in designing these rules in the first place. Going back to our story, Cummings denied the latest claims, which have caused a public outcry, particularly among people who avoided contact with elderly relatives, some of whom had died from the virus. Further to this, as we said earlier, Mr. Douglas Ross actually felt so passionate by it that he resigned this morning. He's the Under-Secretary of State for Scotland. And he said that the senior aide, his view of the government guidance was not shared by the vast majority of people, and that was a BBC release this morning. It's another distraction, isn't it? Perhaps people are, we've all been. This is my 70th day in isolation. A lot of people have done longer than that. I've been in my garden, I think, 7 times, and the most I've been is the past 3 days. So I think there's a lot of people that want to vent anger, and at the end of the day, if you were a parent, you would do the same thing, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Did he comply with the sentiment of the lockdown? It's really, that is very difficult to kind of weigh that up, because he's pointed out so many loopholes now that it seems that there might be a tendency that people will do what they want. There are a lot of people saying that he's undermining the message and undermining what the government is trying to do. But again, it's hard, isn't it? If you were a parent, if I was a parent, I'd do the same thing, I think. But at the same time, there is that public message, and it does seem that the majority of people, when I've been listening to the Victoria Derbyshire show, or again on the BBC, and sort of scanning all of the different networks, a lot of people are outraged that he's trying to justify what he's done and saying that he did not break the spirit of the lockdown at that time. It's a difficult one, isn't it?
Yes.
I really don't know how to go forward with that. But it doesn't seem to be going away, this story. It's been about 3 days now. It's still here.
Must be hard. Yes. All right. Thank you so much, Jennifer. You do take care of yourself, and thank you for your updates, EBC United Kingdom Bureau. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Alma. Reporting for EBC United Kingdom, I'm Jennifer Ringwood. We live in interesting times.
Now, Sweden, which has gained international attention for its softer approach to the coronavirus, that many of its European neighbors said on Monday its number of deaths passed the 4,000 mark. The Public Health Agency said it had recorded 4,029 deaths and 33,843 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in the country of some 10.3 million inhabitants, with 90% of the deceased over the age of 70. Sweden's death toll has so far surpassed the tolls in neighboring Nordic countries, which have all imposed more restrictive containment measures. According to AFP's own database, Sweden's virus death rate of 399 per million inhabitants is far higher than Norway's 43 per million, Denmark's 97, or Finland's 55. However, it's still lower than for France at 435 per million, Britain and Italy both at 542, and Spain at 615. Now, critics have accused Swedish authorities of gambling with citizens' lives by not imposing strict stay-at-home measures. But the Public Health Agency has insisted its approach is sustainable in the long term and has rejected drastic short-term measures as too ineffective to justify their impact on society. The Scandinavian country has kept schools open for children under the age of 16, along with cafes, bars, restaurants, and businesses, while urging people to respect social distancing and hygiene guidelines. In one of the world's richest cities, thousands of people are queuing for free food. This is in Geneva, and joining us live from Switzerland is Christine Benedicto. Hello, Christine.
Hello, Alma. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for being in the program. What are your updates from Geneva, from Switzerland?
So here's the update from Switzerland. The total number of confirmed cases in Switzerland and the Principality of Liechtenstein as of this morning is 30,761, with 1,648 fatalities. So far, the Federal Office of Public Health states that 372,000 tests have been carried out and only 15 new confirmed cases have been added in the past 24 hours. So there's indeed a clear decline in the number of new infections compared to when Switzerland was at the peak of the crisis. Now, as we know, COVID-19 has forced governments not only to put in place precautionary measures to ensure the safety of their population, but also ways in order to help the economy. And Switzerland was very quick indeed to act on this and has put more than 60 billion Swiss francs. That's approximately 61 billion US dollars, depending on the current exchange rate, to carry out different measures. And some of these include facilitating credits for small to medium-sized companies and compensation for loss of income for people unable to work if, for example, they've been put into quarantine for preventive purposes, and for self-employed people whose livelihood has been impacted by the preventive measures imposed by the government. In the recent weeks, however, as you have mentioned, Alma, the reality has come to light that even in a rich country like Switzerland, financial insecurity also exists. And the COVID-19 crisis has exposed its magnitude to some extent. In Geneva, for example, there have been weekly food distributions in the recent weeks. So there are people in need, as seen in the growing number of people lining up every week to receive food parcels. Last weekend, no less than 2,900 people came to a food distribution. That's approximately 600 more compared to last week. And these people didn't mind having to queue for hours, many arriving even in advance before the distribution even started. And statistics show that close to half of those who queue to receive food aid are women, and mostly migrants who do not have legal status in the country or in the city, nor easy access to proper housing, food, and healthcare. So this food aid is made possible thanks to the work of different associations and NGOs, and of course the City of Geneva, but also thanks to private donors. And for last weekend's food distribution, there were close to 900 donors, hundreds of whom were anonymous. So the current situation shows indeed that the COVID-19 crisis has had an impact on the lives and economic situation of people, but also it also demonstrates that many do care and do what they can do to help. And further, another collection actually of food and hygiene products is organized this Friday in order to prepare for future distributions. Aside from this, Switzerland is still on the second phase of its ease measures against COVID-19. The authorities will confirm this week the new measures being lifted on June 8th, which is planned to be the third and final phase. In the meantime, so primary school students have gone back to the normal schedule, and stores and restaurants have been open already for 2 weeks now. And starting this weekend, religious services can also resume under a list of specific conditions that they have to follow. So in general, the rhythm of life is therefore a bit faster now compared to mid-March, when the lockdown started. But of course, strict hygiene rules still apply everywhere. So that's the update from Switzerland.
All right. So did you mention about the microfinancing for small businesses? How's the government helping small businesses get back on their feet?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, so the government is providing financial aid. So in terms of that financial aid being given to small to medium-sized companies, one of the measures consists of the government providing cash or liquidity relief. So for companies in need because of the consequences of the virus, they can seek credit from the banks quickly, systematically, and also with really minimum bureaucracy through an online application form. So basically, the government serves as a guarantor. That's why credit applications are simplified. So concerned companies can ask credit for up to 10% of their annual turnover, and the process is even more simplified if the amount that is requested is less than 500,000 Swiss francs. So payable in 5 years, the credit is given at 0 interest rate for amounts less than 500,000 Swiss francs.
All right. Thank you very much, Christine, for your updates. Thank you, EBC Switzerland Bureau.
Thank you for having me. I'm Christine Benedicto from Geneva, Switzerland, reporting for Eagle News International. We live in interesting times.
Okay, let's get the latest situation, coronavirus situation in Russia, among others. Joining us live from Moscow is Emmy Coloma. Hello, Emmy.
Hello, Alma.
Hi, how are you
Good
doing?
evening there.
Good to see you back.
I'm good.
Okay, so what are your updates for us, Emmy?
Okay. Now is 76 coronavirus positive patients diagnosed with pneumonia have died in Moscow. The city center said the overall coronavirus death toll in Moscow stands at 3,807. Today, total of 362,342 coronavirus cases have been confirmed in Russia, with 12,331 patients having recovered, Russia's latest data. Russia's Vector Institute to begin clinical trials of COVID-19 vaccine in late June. The Vector State Center for Virology and Biotechnology, Vector Institute, plans to begin clinical trials of its coronavirus vaccine in late June this year. The center's CEO, Rinat Makshutov, told us, adding that the institute picked 3 promising vaccine prototypes for further research. In April, during a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, Makshutov announced that the Vector Institute was ready to begin the first stage of clinical trials in May already. With the permission of the Ministry of Health, Health Minister Mikhail Murasko said, at the time that it was possible. In accordance with the approved program, the clinical trials will start on June 29, 2020, after we obtain the results on the specific activity and safety of the vaccine from animal testing and obtain permission of the Ministry of Health. So far, we are on our schedule, he said. The Vector CEO said that 25 vaccine variants were tested on animals, adding that 3 promising prototypes were chosen both as the most effective and most suitable for mass production. Meanwhile, in other news, 4 people were killed after a strong windstorm hit Russia's 5th most populous region. The state Tasran reported Tuesday. Wind reached up to 28 meters per second in the Sverdlovsk region on Monday, toppling trees and causing widespread blackouts that left 130,000 residents without power. Footage from Ekaterinburg, Russia, 4th largest city, showed roofs being torn off buildings, antenna towers being pushed over, and other structures falling. The victims included a worker who fell from a construction crane, a man who was struck by a metal gate, a woman killed by a falling tree branch, and a man who was hit by a roof that fell off a building. About 300 rescue workers have been deployed to damaged sites in the Sverdlovsk region and continue to work throughout Tuesday. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much, Emmy. Mag-iingat po kayo dyan. My love to EBC Bureau. Thank you so much, EBC Russian Bureau. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. We live in interesting time from Moscow, Russia.
And U.S. President Donald Trump takes part in a wreath-laying ceremony at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Arlington National Cemetery to commemorate Memorial Day and honor those who have died while serving in the U.S. Armed Forces. Take a look. Eagle News, we'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Says the best defense is still containment.
We are in uncharted territory.
Volume 450. If I want to 100%.
Welcome back. Singapore's virus-hit economy could shrink by as much as 7% this year, the worst reading since independence, according to the government today, as it unveiled fresh multi-billion-dollar stimulus package. The city-state is seen as a bellwether of the global economy, and the forecast historic contraction highlights the extreme pain being wrought on countries by the killer disease. The warning came as Singapore's Deputy Prime Minister unveiled a fresh support package worth 33 billion Singaporean dollars for the troubled city, which has been crippled by months of lockdowns around the world. The Trade Ministry's forecast, which was a downgrade from the maximum 4% contraction predicted in March, came as official data showed the economy shrank 0.7% on year in the first 3 months of the year, while it reduced 4.7% from the previous quarter. The financial hub is one of the world's most open economies and is usually hit hardest and earliest during any global shock. In other news, Russia has begun manufacturing the prototype of its first strategic stealth bomber, state news agency TASS reported on Tuesday, as the country presses ahead with the modernization of its military. Quoting defense industry sources, TASS said the state-controlled United Aircraft Corporation was overseeing the project. It also said material was being shipped for the project and that work had begun on the cockpit of the bomber known as the PAC-DA. One of the sources told TASS the final assembly of the entire machine should be complete in 2021. Now, stealth bombers are designed to evade radar detection while carrying large amounts of weaponry. Russian officials have revealed few details of the project, though last year, Deputy Defense Minister Alexei Krivoruchko said aircraft maker Tupolev, which is part of the United Aircraft Corporation, was in charge. Reached by AFP, United Aircraft Corporation spokesman Sergei Loktionov declined to comment on the report, but Mr. Tupolev also did not immediately reply to a request for comment. Reports have said the plane will feature a flying wing designed similar to U.S. stealth bombers, fly at subsonic speeds, and carry strategic cruise missiles and hypersonic weapons. The U.S. Air Force's B-2 stealth bombers are among the world's most feared aircraft. China is also working on its own long-range stealth bomber, the CNH-20, with the South China Morning Post reporting this month that it could make its first public appearance at an air show in November. Eagle News will be right back.
It's Teacher Sally,
Ate DJ,
and Art, and we're from Net25 Kids! We hope that you're all safe at home.
And while you're spending time with your family, join us as we feature different topics and fun activities that the whole family could enjoy during the quarantine.
That's right! And because we are celebrating EBC's 52nd anniversary, may mga bago kaming episodes para sa inyo. Kaya naman, ihanda na ang inyong mga art materials, friends! Gagawa tayo ng iba't ibang art at do-it-yourself projects!
Ilabas nyo na rin ang inyong mga musical instruments. We'll sing and do fun challenges that will surely bring out the creative side in you.
At syempre, halina't matuto at magbasa. Samantalahin natin ang pagkakataon. Kahit nasa bahay tayo, dapat tuloy-tuloy pa rin ang pag-aaral. Because every day is a learning opportunity. And opportunities like these should be made into teachable moments.
Tama po, Teacher Sally. Ang Net25 Kids ay para sa mga bata,
para sa mga ate at kuya,
at pati na rin sa mga magulang. So, catch Kid Kwento every Mondays and Wednesdays from 4 to 4:30 p.m.
Anong sa inyo? Every Tuesdays and Thursdays from 4 to 4:30 p.m.
And mapapanood nyo na rin sa TV ang Be Brighter. That's every Fridays, 4 to 4:30 p.m.
Hindi lang po yan. May sorpresa kaming hatid sa inyo tuwing Sabado at Linggo. Abangan nyo po ang show namin ng ate ko. Soon!
Lahat ng yan ay hatid sa inyo ng
Net25 Kids!
Hello, my name is Robin and I'm 5 years old. My mom and dad said many people are getting sick. That is why we have to stay at home. That is why I cannot go to school. I cannot play outside, and I cannot even visit my friends. We can only go outside if we visit the doctor, or if we need to buy some food. And when we get home, we have to wash our hands. While I'm at home, I do my homework, clean up my toys, help cooking our food, and help my parents with their work. Please stay home so we can all play together again. Bye!
Parts of the Antarctic Peninsula will change color as green snow caused by blooming algae is expected to spread with increases in global temperatures, according to research. Now, researchers from the University of Cambridge and the British Antarctic Survey combined satellite imagery with the on-the-ground observations to detect the current extent of green algae in the world's most barren continent. Take a look.
These are special microscopic algae that live on the snow surface, and if you look over here you can see there's patches of green and hopefully you can see some patches of red if the light conditions permit it further up the top there. So it's not really possible to go and actually analyse and study each individual bloom because there's just too many of them, they're quite far away and it's not possible to get to them. So what we've been trying to do is use satellite technology to actually photograph these blooms during the season, and we're trying to time satellite passovers with the work that we do on the ground. It's what we call ground truthing.
Although often considered devoid of plant life, Antarctica is home to several types of algae which grow on slushy snow and suck carbon dioxide from the air. The team calculated that algae on the peninsula currently absorb levels of CO2 equivalent to 875,000 average car journeys. They also found that the majority of algae blooms were within 5 kilometers of a penguin colony, as the bird's excrement is an excellent fertilizer. While more algae means more CO2 is absorbed, the plants could have a small but adverse impact on local albedo, how much of the sun's heat is reflected back from Earth's surface. Whereas white snow reflects 80% of radiation that hits it, for green snow that figure is closer to 45%. The team, however, said the reduced albedo is likely to impact Antarctica's climate on any meaningful scale. Meanwhile, Indian cities in Rajasthan saw swarms of locusts in the city. Millions of these flying insects flew in from Pakistan in search of crops. And many countries, including Pakistan and a few in East Africa, have suffered crop losses due to the locust invasions. Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and Gujarat are the worst affected states. Some 38% of Pakistan's area spread over the provinces of Balochistan, Sindh, and Punjab are breeding grounds for locusts, according to a report by the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. The COVID-19 pandemic is posing fresh challenges for some 100-odd workers who are battling these insects using vehicle-mounted sprayers, pesticides, and drones in the searing desert heat. They are staying in the villages where they are being given foods by locals and going out at night to hunt down the insects in face masks and wearing some basic protective clothing. Though only providing limited services for now, the Philippine Consulate in Honolulu has led the way for that country's foreign service mission to resume some form of normalcy. Eagle News correspondent Georgie Carnate has more.
Good day to our friends and viewers of Eagle News. I thank you for having me on your program today.
Consul Grace Ann Bulos of the Philippine Consulate General in Honolulu describes to Eagle News the overall situation of Filipinos in Hawaii and American Samoa since the COVID-19 pandemic began in this part of the world. She also explained how she and her colleagues kept in touch with their fellow kababayans.
As you know, tourism is the main driver of Hawaii's economy. The state government's decision to close tourism, compounded with the stay-at-home or the work-from-home orders, has affected a lot of our people who are employed in the tourism industry, including those who work for hotels, tourism sites, restaurants, and retail businesses. We have seen a massive loss of jobs and in turn an increase in the need for human services. The Philippine Consulate General communicates regularly with its contacts in the Filipino community either through email or mobile phone. With today's advancements in information technology, communication has become very easy. Nowadays, there are so many platforms for communication, including social media and even meeting platforms. Information for our clients and the public is also regularly posted on the Philippine Consulate General website and our social media accounts.
Despite the challenges brought about by the pandemic, Consul Bulos shares her thoughts on how Filipinos learned and benefited from this ongoing crisis.
For every crisis, there are also opportunities. The pandemic has been a blessing in disguise. It has provided families the opportunity to spend more time with each other. We have also learned how to make the most use of technology to keep in touch and to forge connections. We have become resourceful and creative in doing with what we have. Some have even learned new skills. So these are just some of the things that are part of the new normal that we are now living in.
Since May 4th, the consulate has resumed operations, albeit on a limited scale, as Hawaii continues to lead the United States in flattening its curve of COVID-19 cases.
We're the first Philippine Foreign Service post in the United States to resume operations. And the reason we were able to open sooner than the others is because the COVID-19 cases in Hawaii are not that high. And this is thanks to the government action, the early government action taken to help stop the pandemic. There are a number of factors that we needed to consider in deciding to reopen. First, we need to adhere to the state directives to help stop the transmission of the coronavirus. Secondly, we are affected by things that happen on the ground in the Philippines. And thirdly, we need to protect our clients as well as our own personnel. So because of these things, We decided that our operating hours will be shortened. We're not fully operational at the moment. Our hours are only from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. That's the time that we're open to the public, and that's from Monday to Friday, except holidays.
Finally, Consul Bulos expressed some optimism and pride for the Filipino communities amidst the ongoing crisis.
Well, the pandemic is truly a challenge. Filipinos in Hawaii and American Samoa have remained resilient, and they have even found ways to volunteer and to help other people. The Bayanihan spirit is still very much alive.
In response to the economic hardships and unemployment faced by Filipinos, the consulate last week launched Trabaho HI, an online Facebook page which seeks to connect employers and Filipino Americans job seekers. Reporting from Honolulu, Hawaii, Joji Carnate, Eagle News. We live in interesting time.
And before we close, we leave you with a word of hope. At the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. See you again tomorrow evening. Good night. I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.
This program was brought to you by SMC Infrastructure, building a better world.